Welcome back to Kim Reads. Okay, so we're going to start the next story. Samantha Learns a Lesson. Chapter 1, Notes and Knee Bends. Something poked Samantha in the back. Samantha jumped slightly, but she didn't look up. She knew the signal. It was from Helen. Helen Whitney had the desk behind Samantha's. Both desks were all like the other desks in the classroom at Miss Crampton's Academy for Girls. Their iron sides were molded in lacy swirls and curls, and one particular curl was just the right size for holding notes. Talking in class was not allowed at Miss Crampton's. So when Helen had managed to tell Samantha, she would write it on a piece of paper. Then she would roll it up, stick it in the proper iron curl, and poke Samantha in the back with her pencil. Samantha would wait until Miss Stevens wasn't looking, then drop her hand back and pulled out the note. Once she caught her finger in the iron swirls and barely got it loose before Miss Stevens turned around. But usually the system worked wonderfully. Now Samantha waited until the teacher's back was turned. She waited for the note. It said, "What the dickens does Lagorge mean?" Samantha looked up quickly and squashed the note small and shoved it into her pocket. It would be bad enough to be caught passing notes in school. She couldn't imagine what would happen if she were caught with a note that said, "The Dickens." Didn't Helen have enough sense not to write almost swear words in school? There wasn't enough time for Samantha to answer Helen's note. Miss Stevens had already finished writing a long list of French words on the blackboard. Now she turned around and faced the class, and she looked straight at Helen. "Helen, will you please tell us what Lagorge means?" Miss Stevens asked. Miss Samantha tried to give Helen a clue. She cleared her throat rather loudly. Miss Stevens stared at her, looked back at Helen. Helen didn't answer, so Samantha tried again. She rubbed the back of her neck. "Samantha, are you well?" asked Miss Stevens. She was looking at Samantha through gold-rimmed spectacles that seemed to see everything. She looked as if she had a pretty good idea of what was going on. "Yes, ma'am," said Samantha softly. She folded her hands on her neck. Helen would have to answer on her own. "Is it the neck?" squeaked Helen uncertainly. "No, Helen, it is not," said Miss Stevens. She looked around the room. Edith Eddleton stretched her hand high in the air, and Miss Stevens called on her. "Lagorge," said Edith smugly, "means the throat." "That is correct," said Miss Stevens, and Edith gloated. Samantha could just imagine Edith keeping score in her head. Me, 107. Everyone else, 0. Edith was smart, but not as smart as she thought she was. Probably no one on earth was as smart as Edith Eddleton thought she was. The class was finishing the list of words on the blackboard before the lunch bell rang. The girls stood beside their desks. They waited until Miss Stevens nodded for them to go in their lunch boxes from the cloakroom. Then they filed quietly out the door. The day was warm, so the girls could eat outside on the benches in the yard. Helen, Ida, Dean, and Ruth Adams waited for Samantha at their usual spot. Samantha squirmed as she sat down next to them. Her legs stretched from the long flannel underwear that was tucked underneath her stockings, but she had to wear it, whether the days were warm or cold. Grandmary said flannel underwear kept children from getting consumption, and she insisted Samantha put it on at the beginning of September. "Do you think Miss Crampton will make us do arm stretches today?" Ida asked between bites of her chopped olive sandwich. Miss Crampton was head of the academy. She was very serious about exercise. At 1 o'clock every day, she came to the classroom to lead girls in exercises. "If she makes us do 50 arm stretches, I'm going to faint," Ida said with a sigh. "At least with arm stretches are better than knee bends," answered Helen. "I hate knee bends. I think Miss Crampton is trying for the world record in knee bends." "It could be worse," said Ruth. "At my cousin's school, They have to practice swimming, but they don't have any water. They have to hang with big ropes around their waist. Then they have to kick and paddle, just hanging in the air like that. Ida looked at her in disbelief. "Oh, they never," she gasped. Ruth nodded importantly. "I swear they do it." And she licked jelly neatly off her fingers. That swimming thing was a real thing that schools once did. The girls were quiet for a moment, all giving silent thanks for the swimming hole in Mount Bedford. At least they can learn to swim in real water. "Maybe knee bends aren't so bad after all," Ida finally said. Samantha took a gingerbread cookie out of her lunchbox and grew quiet while the other girls talked on. Every time she had gingerbread, Samantha thought about Nellie. Samantha had given Nellie her first taste of gingerbread last summer, when Nellie worked next door to Ryland's house. But Mrs. Ryland sent Nellie back to the city. Now Samantha missed her friend. She thought about Nellie every day. She remembered all the things Nellie had told her about her life in the city, and she worried. Nellie had said her whole family, all 5 of them, lived in one room in a crowded building. There was only one window in the room, and the air always smelled bad. In the summer, the room was very hot, and in the winter, it was terribly cold. There was a little stove for cooking, but there was never enough coal to make the room warm. And Nellie had said they were nearly always hungry because there was never enough money. Samantha remembered all these things Nellie had told her, and the gingerbread tasted dry in her mouth. As she swallowed the last of her milk, Samantha's thoughts jerked back to the schoolyard by the ringing of Miss Crampton's bell. She hurried to get back in line with the other girls. They all marched back inside to face another afternoon, beginning with Miss Crampton's knee bends. That's the end of that chapter. See you later.